Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Writers and Books. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York, if you're tuning in from online. We offer readings, workshops, literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. We're so happy to collaborate with Boa Editions. For this fall, we have events with all their fall slate of authors. You can find more information about that on our website, wabe.org. And I want to say that books are available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books, which is downstairs. And you can also find it online at ampersandbooks.org. Writers and Books would like to call attention to the complex and troubled history of the lands on which we live and work. We are hosting this event from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they are known as the Seneca people, or the keeper of the Western Door. We're so happy to have Chen Chen with us tonight. He'll be in conversation with author and poet Peter Connors, who's also the publisher and executive director of Boa Editions. In his highly anticipated second collection of poems, Your Emergency Contact Has Experienced an Emergency, Chen Chen continues his investigation of family, both blood and chosen, examining what one inherits and what one invents. As a queer Asian American living through an era of Trump, mass shootings, and the COVID-19 pandemic. With irrepressible humor and play, these anarchic poems celebrate life, despite all that would crush aliveness. Chen Chen's debut book of poems, When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a List of Further Possibilities, also from Boa, was longlisted for the National Book Award and won the Tom Gunn Award, among other honors. His book of essays, In Cahoots with the Rabbit God, is forthcoming from Nomi Press in 2023. He teaches for the low residency MFA programs at New England College and Stone Coast. Please welcome Chen Chen.
Hello. Oh, this is comfy. Cool. I didn't realize that's going to be soon. It's nice to get somewhere and then you're like, I can sit. It's very nice. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Celebrating some book, hanging out, and so glad to be in conversation with Peter in a bit. So yeah, I'll start with reading some poems. And I want to start with a poem from the first book, actually, as a kind of predecessor. So this dusty old thing, 2017. When even was that? It's called Chapter Feet. Autumn was an argument about hair and how much of it. Too much, not enough, just right, but just for now. And then it was winter. The licorice of every season was rather inappropriate. Well, okay, how about this? And you put on more of my deodorant. What can one do but put on more deodorant? Paris, lopsided, is still Paris. A congregation, a conflagration, a smiling conundrum in the form of a ladder it takes years to climb down. In our last ever Scrabble game, you changed my pour into poured. I tried to ask my parents to leave the room, but not my life. It was very hard, because the room was the size of my life, because my life was small, and wanted to eat candy corn instead of confrontation. Raising one's voice in a small space felt at once godlike and childish. You agreed with me out of a practical concern, and I loved you for it. We were two horses in search of the least abandoned constellation. But the night sky was overtaken by the beatitude of the ultimate force. Also, Ben had upset Wes with his choice of neckties, but then the author decided it would all be better in the second person, actually. When did I first realize my parents were not infinite? That I could see the end of them, past their capes and catchphrases. One day in fourth grade, my teacher said, "You're lucky to be so young. You'll heal up from that bicycle accident in no time. No scars. No time, no scars. Sing it with me. Loud as Reykjavik summer. Easy as an etch a sketch and made a mistake. I will try my best not to mistake you for my parents. I mean my problems with my parents. I mean me. Believe with me another melody. That the room, the life could go by a different way. That we could say hello, meaning gentleness with all our might." So I wrote down what I was going to read, which seemed like a good plan. And then my phone died. So it's charging over there. So I'm using my purchase. But texted this. Okay. I'm right on track. I got the first poem right. Thank God. This next one is called The Author's Note, and it's based on, well, one, just being in grad school for like 8 million years, and just really not wanting to go to class 1 week. I was talking to Jeff about it, and he was like, "Oh, just say that you're dead, like currently dead, and it'll be fine next week." So the part about that also makes reference to Coldplay, which is a band. Case needed to know they make music still. And Buffy is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who is a fictional person who fights vampires in Southern California, or did in the early 2000s. Hope she's better now. Dr. Snow. Please excuse Chen Chen from class. He is currently dead. He came in last Thursday exhibiting clear signs of dying, such as saying in a clear voice, "I am nothing, except the wish to listen to Coldplay." And after one too many plays of their 2002 hit, The Scientist, he's dead. Though few have improved from this condition, Chen Chen has been prescribed long vows and chicken stock, and more recent music. Also, some rudimentary Tai Chi early each morning in his room with the curtains drawn. Medically speaking, Chen Chen's current state is very gross. It would be unwise, however, to try to force Chen Chen, physically or with the promise of new Buffy episodes, back into life. It would be unwise and gross to reach out to Chen Chen's parents. They are not his emergency contacts, and have exhibited clear signs of wishing he were dead, such as saying in a clear voice, "You'd be better off dead. Better than whatever you are with other men." Of course, after learning of Chen Chen's death, they fell to their knees into a state commonly referred to as utter devastation. The studies show that this state is ultimately butt kiss. Studies predict that if Chen Chen recovers, it will take around 3 months for his parents to find his fully restored state unsatisfying. Or if he remains his remains, they will find themselves fully content with the memory of Chen Chen, their sweet Chen Chen, before he became so whatever he was. They will think of him so fondly while sharing a bowl of strawberry ice cream, the last thing they remember him loving. Are you going to recall? Did I answer? So sorry. It's called so there are a bunch of poems in the same book that are titled "The School of Something." I was thinking a lot about learning, so teaching, being in grad school, how true learning can sometimes poems are often at odds with institutions. Right? So their poems called like The School of Logic, The School of Joy, and this one is called The School of Australia. Your emergency contact has called to quit. Your backup plan is backed away. Your boyfriend has joined a boy band named All Your Former Boyfriends and Sarah McLaughlin. In the ugly teapot, uglier luggage section of your local Dillard's, you'd like to scream. Meanwhile, your father has decided to pursue his original dream and move to Australia, the brochure version he fell for in college. In Australia, he will study beach studies, and his Western name Tony will finally catch on. Tony, the Australians will say, where have they been hiding you? And Tony will say, I never imagined I'd be doing way better than the sun. And on his way home from the school of the beach, its shells and endless glitter, Tony will toss out a dog-eared copy of the manual he received upon arriving in America. How to have deeply sorrowful exchanges with your son about your immigrant hardships. How to make him understand he must become a neurosurgeon, at least a dentist. The manual will go on to a second career, titling academic papers. Australia will be renamed Tony's Son, Get Your Shit Together. TSGYST will call to say, but remember, you're already a glittering stretch of dream, your own emergency, Tony. I kind of love that as like an Italian immigrant. Tony, my father. This is called The School of Fury. The School of Fury. As Robert Frost said, the best way out is always through. Or, as Alanis Morissette said, the only way out is through. Or, as I said, 8th grade was all Robert Frost and Alanis Morissette. Because I had to learn who the important white people were. And worship immigrant hardship instead of building a house more breathable. To read and remember and know and say so without the echo of an accent. When the white kids knew nothing about Marilyn Sheen, when the white adults knew nothing about Lawson Kusal Madden, when the 30-something white guy in poetry class says, a poem is this, based on what a 70-something white guy once said. And everyone just nods, and I want to say no, and scream, and would Frost have called me a chink. And take everyone through the wound of it, through the cat with the hummingbird in its mouth, through my much desired, never fulfilled Halloween costume, which was the wheel from Wheel of Fortune. Through the night my father came to pick me up from a friend's house, through the early fall sidewalk, through Newton, Massachusetts, outside Boston, inside whiteness, through my enjoyment of the West Wing with white friends, through my father knocking on the wrong door, neighbor's door, through the neighbor's door, where you can hear them whispering, deciding to call the police because who is the man at the door calling in a strange voice. Through my father almost getting arrested for trying to retrieve his son. Through later in the car, my father insisting, you gave me the wrong address. Through don't ever give me the wrong address again. Through my imitations of Frost in 8th grade, which my teacher called impeccable. Throughout the town, on every doorstep except ours, a little family of carved pumpkins. Through the happy, happy wounds, their faces. Through, why don't you try not going to the wrong house next time? Through hugging my white friends goodbye, yeah, see you in class, because nothing was wrong. Will be gone after these brief messages. God stopped by in his magenta rowboat. I said, God, you have to stop stopping by if you're never going to tell me the meaning of life. God said, life is meaningless, while language often means too much. My grandmother stopped by and said, no, the meaning of life is love, the kind that produces children. Why don't you have a boyfriend? My mother stopped by and said, look, he's busy with his studies. Stop asking. God got back on his turquoise steamship. Life is a joyful thing, he said. It's probably very good for you. Check my list. I remembered so well up until now. Okay. That one. It's like you give yourself a little assignment. Both the student and the teacher. This is called summer. Your emergency contact has experienced an emergency. The Texas sun shines hard on everything but the detective. You hide out eating every meal from microwavable volcanoes. Sometimes you're studying abroad and ask the kitchen table where to find the closest subway station. Sometimes the kitchen table replies by the family of cockroaches in the bathroom. Other times, language is the last thing you should learn more of. Cockroach family nods. The Texas sky changes color like a vast PowerPoint, very proud of itself. You feel like a cockroach, except you know how to use the microwave. Sometimes every living thing just sounds like, please. Other times, please don't. Please no. The mother cockroach says, in the event of a sudden loss of cabin meaning, backup meanings will drop in the overhead compartment. The Texas moon shines like a misplaced clue. Please grab hold of the meaning and pull it to your face. Your kitchen table shines back on a solid station. Please hold. Focus. Oh, yeah, this one. This is another of school poems. The school of a few or a lot of my favorite things. My favorite season, horny during a snowstorm. My favorite sad while watching ducks waddle about. My favorite recent development, that ghosts prefer to be called spooky babes. Some of my favorite sunlights include those that arrive in December like guests, like we've walked into a surprise party and they have a party, and it is a ghost party. Excuse me, a spooky babe party. My favorite bedtime story. Once upon a time, in a Chicago thrift store, I met the most stunning purple blazer. My least favorite anytime story. Once upon a time, in a Boston area laundromat, I remembered middle school, all of it, and I couldn't stop hating my hair. When did I start loving my hair? Not once. Have I started? I still think of him, that boy from that most pimply least favorite time, the boy who walked through each seventh grade classroom, tall and Swedish and American and boy. He smelled like the dictionary definition of law. He could have been the definition popular, but was a total nerd. His favorites obscure elf novels and obscure German thrillers, and me. We walked side by side through those halls. Still, he could sit by his backyard swimming pool like he was born there, the son of suburbia, a babe, a favorite sunlight, and not just mine, and not really mine the way I hungered for, hungering into his blue eyes, wishing at him after he emerged from the blue, all dripping blonde bangs, all dire-lapped pain in my chest. Middle school. Wasn't that when I started to say, I hate math, stop the piano lessons, I'm not like the other Asian kids, I'm not like what they love. Once upon a time, at dinner, I told my mother to stop making so much. Why do you have to make so much? Du all time, all the time. And she said, I thought it was your favorite. In school, I kept saying, I love writing, which I did, which I do, which wasn't tall and Swedish and American, but at least it wasn't math, Mozart, the math, Mozart. Years later, earlier today, I said, I don't know. As though saying, yes, really, I'm a person. Once upon a time, after school, I played Mozart. I played. I didn't know I was a whole country's favorite way to say somewhere not real. Or maybe I did know, but not enough to stop moving my hands across the keys. Would I love the piano now? Could I play my favorites? Would I see my hands movement, my hands as sound? Let's read one more. So something's called winter. We were just talking about what happened. Winter. Big, smelly bowel movements this blue January morning. From the living room TV, a commercial from our TV company. For the fastest, the only, meaning love us above all others. What makes poop more pungent on certain days? A question for science. From the living room TV, the powerful sight law, bark, order, meaning love us else. Years ago, a teacher said never to use the word poop in a poem. Today, the icy kiss of the toilet seat wakes me up. Today, I poop while my boyfriend shouts in the living room, did you hear that? Meaning the atomic scientists who say we are now 2.5 minutes to midnight. But still I marvel whenever poop comes out as one true platonic tube. I'm trying to be marvelous and to make my enemies throw it. I mean, if you shower with soap and eat well, maintaining consistent gastrointestinal health, you should be ready for a rim job or other forms of anal play. My boyfriend and I are not platonic. From the TV, a white supremacist cites science, marks two sides to infamy. I mean, up the throat, out the mouth, the fastest, the only way the powerful will let go of their shit. I mean, my boyfriend and I are not into scat, but if you are, I hope your beloved produces the most fragrant, citrusy shit. I mean, is shit and scat more or less literary than poop? I mean, one winter night, I got sick. I pooped to the bed. And he just thought of me, helped strip the sheets, carry it all to the washer. I kept saying, I'm so sorry, shivering. I'm sorry. But he said, what? Thank you.
Hey,
Hi,
nice to see you.
nice to see you.
Um, let's talk about winter.
Yeah.
To me, it is a beautiful love poem. And I feel like, and I was just saying this a little bit earlier, like, I feel like in many ways, this collection is a big love letter to Jeff. A lot of it. And so that poem in particular, Winter, also has so many different aspects of your poetry in general, and I think sums up this collection so well. And one of them is the poetry professor saying to you, you can't use, poop in a poem, and then you proceed to use poop like 100 times in the poem.
Yeah.
Can we talk some about that? Like, I guess I'm wondering, like, it's almost like a challenge. And you said
Yeah.
before, like, I'm the student and the professor. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. So can we talk some about that?
Yeah, it's funny as a teacher now too, like in workshop, I'll always be like, well, I'm probably right, but also you should disagree with me. Because I think that's also where things, there's a lot of clarity that comes in disagreement, actually. Where you realize, oh, that is something I actually want to do. The poet Mary Ruefle says something, I think, in one of her essays, Madness, Rack and Honey, where she talks about like something like you might get advice, feedback, whether that's in a workshop or from a friend reading your work. And she says sometimes it's not doing what they said, but actually leaning more into the things not to do, because you actually didn't go far enough with that choice. Right? It's not like a really intentional choice yet. You might be talking around the thing you're really trying to get at. So I love that idea that actually sometimes you just have to go full throttle direction. And I do, yeah, I like taking it as a challenge. I mean, I have authority issues. So it's just, parental and other issues. So yeah, that was one of them. Don't say poop. Also, there was one, actually the last poem in the first book, Poplar Street, came out of a workshop where the instructor was like, actually telling us something to do more of, which is put place names in your poems. And I was like, but why? So then I kind of took that on as a challenge. It was like a made up place name, but then it got something real emotionally. So yeah, I love that you can think of anything as like a prompt, whether you want to go in that direction or not.
Is there anything while you're writing that will come out and you'll go like, no, that's a don't for me, and that you have to check yourself on?
I think a lot, sometimes it has to do with tone, because I'm always thinking about how to juggle the humor, the more serious elements. And so there are times when it's like, this is too silly. But it's important for me to also experiment with that. So sometimes I have to go that way to figure something out. So there are times when I want to rein it in, make sure that there's some kind of balance in the tone. And I've tried at least a couple of times in this book to write poems that didn't rely on humor at all. And I was like, this feels weird. But I think it was also an important way to grow. Yeah.
So about, it must have been about 10 years ago, a poet named Janice N. Harrington won the Pulitzer Prize with a book called Even the Hollow My Body Made Is Gone. And at that time, I remember thinking, like, you can't have a title that long, like, be snappier with it.
Wait.
Yeah. So along comes Chen, where when I grow up, I want to be a list of further possibilities. I will say every part of my editing, / marketing mind was going like, how's anyone going to walk into a store and ask for that? I mean, and I kept my mouth shut wisely, and I'm glad that I did. But then you come with your emergency contact has experienced an emergency. So what I haven't asked you before that I would really like to is what's up with long titles?
Yeah, and actually the new, it's actually cool as well. It's like 17 syllables exactly. Which I kept thinking like, oh, I should do something with that in Aloha, but just couldn't. So now it's just a fun fact to share. I didn't plan it that way. But yeah, I didn't like set out to have long titles either time. It wasn't like it has to be long. It was just the phrase, or I guess sentence, it's a full sentence each time, that just spoke to the poems as a whole collection the most. And it felt like also told you something about, again, tone that I wanted to just have in the reader's mind from the get-go. So yeah, but I also love titles that are kind of poems themselves, that they kind of encapsulate this whole world. So I like having fun with that, but yeah, I think the next one, it will have a shorter title. At least by word count. I don't know about syllables. But you know, getting there.
So you mentioned Coldplay and Alanis Morissette, and it also made me think of the discussion around your cover art. And I know that Vincent Chong's work was really important to you, and then this piece in particular, which of course without my glasses I can't remember, is Moonlight Photosynthesis. So this is just a stunning, beautiful piece of artwork that Chen found, and it really, I know it meant a lot to you to have Vincent's work on your cover. And so I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about why this speaks to you so much, and then maybe a little bit just in general about, you know, other art forms. You talk about music and visual art.
Yeah, I love painting. And I know other writers talked about the paths in this way too. Like, oh, I'm a poet, I was a field painter, field musician, etc. It's like all the things that I dreamt doing, and just didn't have the talent or the discipline either. So it was like, oh, I just want to play the piano really well. I want to make zero effort to just like want to show up, you know, wanted like a K-drama, just show up and play it very seductively. But that was not going to happen for me. So, but yeah, I've long been influenced, inspired by other art forms, and yeah, painting especially. Yeah, so Vincent I met through this fundraiser for Kundiman, which is an organization that supports Asian American writers. They're based in New York City. They do an annual retreat. Really amazing literary organization that changed my life. First time I went to the retreat, 2014. It was the first time I like sat in a room surrounded by all these other Asian American writers. It's just incredible. So I've, you know, supporting the art in as many ways as I can. And so they do this annual fundraising event, and part of that they have this silent auction that just happens online. And so I bid on a piece by Vincent Chong, and got it. And then we connected on Instagram, and learned more about his work and his process. Really loved what he does. And it was also important for me to support another queer Chinese artist. So yeah, it's completely original work he made just for this cover, which feels really special. And so I sent him the book, and also he wanted some recordings. So I recorded a bunch of poems. And so the imagery in that cover art actually references several different poems. One of them being winter, actually. Yeah, so it was such a fun collaborative process, and he had never done a book cover either before, so it was a new journey for both of us. And then we got to meet him in person last fall, and he gave me the painting as well. I still need to frame it, but it's just like great to have the artwork. Yeah, it's great.
And speaking of recorded poems, so Chen's first book is now available also as an audiobook read by Chen. It was one of our first audiobook releases. What was it like anyway to do that process? We haven't talked about that since.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Chen was laughing because I think about it so much. I mean, I'm glad to have done it. I mean, glad it's done. But yeah, I didn't realize how much I would be using my voice for that. Because it involved reading every poem twice as well. And yeah, it was like re-inhabiting it in a whole way. It had been a little while since the book came out. So yeah, it was ultimately it was like kind of refreshing because I got to have a whole new perspective. Because yeah, obviously for, ratings, you curate a selection to share. But this was like, okay, let me go through the whole thing. And so that really immersive experience. It's like, oh, this is how it sounds, really, going from home to home. And it was something I also thought about a lot when I was ordering the manuscript. But to hear it, right, it is a different experience.
Well, and you've also given so many readings, but you pick and
Yeah,
choose,
right.
together. So,
Yeah.
So Chen and Jeff and Mr. Rupert Giles just moved to, did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah, their dog, their beloved dog, just moved back to Rochester. They were living here and then they moved somewhere else and then they wisely moved back to Rochester. And so as you're reading, I also started to think like, you have these references,
Yeah.
it might be pop culture or location. What things in Rochester would be worth putting into a poem in that way? That would really sum up Rochester.
Wegmans, obviously.
What else?
There is Wegmans is very central to that poem. And I wrote it when we moved, because I was missing it. But it was funny, like there was a Wegmans that we were going to in Natick, in Boston area, but it wasn't as good. I mean, it was like fancy, but it wasn't good, Sometimes they just try too hard when they franchise out. So we're glad to do this experience. So that's a big part of it. Another thing, I mean, the snow, of course. I lived in Syracuse as well. That's where I did my MFA. I remember when I first got there, everyone was like, and everybody by like November was reading snow poems. It was like that's all you see, it's all you can think about. So I kind of love that it's so like all encompassing, just envelops your entire reality here. And that was something that I seriously missed when I was in West Texas as well, like those really dramatic seasonal changes. I was like, oh, I need things to change externally for me to feel internally different. It's like not happening. And like there's certain places, like parts of the country where people are like, oh, it's like the same weather all the time. And I can see sometimes they feel like that, but I need the leaves to fucking fall and things to die and then come back later and have different feelings around it. So yeah, it's big.
Will you, before we end, maybe as the last final statement, read that Wegmans poem? You don't have to do it to people. And I want to see if other people have any questions for Chen too. But let me ask one more, and then we'll open it up. And that is the difference between the two books. Obviously, a first book is such a sort of momentous thing, and then there's that sophomore, book. So if you had to say to somebody, this is the difference between these two books, and that might go into too. What about what you're working on now?
Yeah, well, I'm working on the next book of poems. Pretty far along, actually. But I mean, it's already a long book, but it was really long when I sent it to you. You were very kind about that. So I was like, I know it needs to not be this long. And so yeah, I have a lot of poems to draw from. So that feels nice because actually I would say the main difference was after the first book, I felt completely depleted and adrift and kind of bereft. Like it was exciting, but at the same time, kind of this loss, where it's like, oh, this has been with me for this long, and like I looked at it, and the small group of people have looked at it, but now I might really be out in the world. So it was just really nerve-wracking, and because I didn't have the next project going. I felt creatively really lost. So, but I was really busy instead because I started a PhD program, which I don't recommend. But I did that to myself and was busy enough and I wasn't thinking. uh, like I might have dwelled on, like I would have obsessed about that feeling of loss more. So it's not to be busy, but I'm really glad now to already be working on the next thing. Yeah, I think that's the main difference for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I don't have a question so much as a compliment. And when you talked about tone, that really resonated with me because I think you're just so absolutely masterful in terms of how the poems really do kind of lure or bring one in with the feeling of playfulness, and then of course we're propelled into this sea of complexity and deeply felt emotions and concerns.
Mm.
And I just think it's so effective, and also I don't I'm not aware of your candid so beautifully and organically. The other thing that I particularly admire is the way in which you approach things in a very narrative, almost prosaic way, and then all of a sudden this insane metaphor is there.
Yeah.
Like, how in hell did he make that? Those are things I never would have put together, and yet they are so brilliant with instant recognition that we have in a very deep way. So that's my way of expressing gratitude and admiration. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just mention that there's this interview with the poet Louise Glick. When she asks like, how do you manage to get all these complicated ideas into your poems? And she said, I don't think about ideas, I think about the tone. And she said, once you have a strange, interesting, compelling, complicated tone, then the ideas will populate the space that's created by that tone. So I think about that a lot. But yeah, the narrative piece, let me say, yeah, I started out as a fiction writer. So I think very narratively.
Not ready to, and that's
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, what she said, plus I do have a question. As a gay man with a complicated relationship to religion. So, and I was reminded of the poems that Anne Sexton wrote at the end of her life. And she kind of built into religion. But the playfulness with God, and I think the first poem of yours that I read was like God.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned God in a turquoise car. So I'm just wondering if you have anything to say about sort of your own maybe interaction with religious thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't raised in any particular religious tradition. I'm still not sure what my parents believe. Like that poem you referenced, there's a bit of like a scene where I ask my mom if she believes in God, and she just responds like too busy, which is pretty close to what actually happened. So yeah, I wasn't raised particularly religious, but I think being in this country, you're around it a lot, especially very like commodified Christianity, I think. And so obviously it's something that I thought a lot about. But yeah, mainly I've been interested in Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism, but it's not something really like practice. It's more something I'm interested in reading about, especially like its tradition in the West and how it's changed. So maybe more from like a philosophical, historical perspective. Yeah, I would say that art and poetry are maybe the closest I get to what you might call a kind of spiritual experience. They're deeply important to me and how I think through emotions and memories, how I move through the world, but also this feeling of connection to something larger. Yeah, it happens a lot through writing. Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's pretty selective thing, I would say, actually. Just talking about this today. That I am, in some ways, like quite a different person from the self on the page. But that also depends on the poem, right? So in some cases, it's like I lean into an aspect of personality. It's really like an alter ego, like the Doctor's Note poem that I read, for instance. It was so liberating to write about myself in the third person. And it just became sort of this other character, and I could get really absurd with it. Yeah, in ways that I wouldn't think to do. So I really think of like the self on the page as another device, right? Like the eye is a way to get to, emotional truths. And so I'm less concerned usually about being this completely like faithful representation of myself. I don't think that really exists anyway. So it's you're constantly growing and changing anyway. But yeah, there are points at which I think about like at the publication stage. This is going to be in the world in some way, and I'm comfortable with it being read as me. And so, but that's sort of a different stage of consideration.
Questions for Chen? I know on October 20th, Chen is going to be at the Jackrabbit Club at around 6:30 or 7 at night for our BOA annual Dining Rhyme fundraiser. It's going to be a poetry reading with a poet named Renee White. And Chen's going to be there, and a bunch of BOA people are going to be there, and people who love poetry just like you. And I hope you will consider checking it out. You can see more information at boaeditions.org. Sorry, but
You gotta do your job.
it's my job.
You know, thank you for doing your job.
Yeah. And by the way, do you guys really talk about eating a bag of hair?
Yeah. we
Okay.
talked about that
I
multiple
love that,
times.
and it also makes me just like queasy.
Yeah,
every
it's
time
like
I
gross.
think of it. Yeah, but they express their love to each other. One of the ways is I would eat a bag of your hair.
Yeah, love is gross.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and for reading and sharing this with us and talking to me. And we're so happy to have you back in town. Would you read the Wegmans poem before we leave?
Sure. The Wegmans poem. So this is called The School of Eternity. It's also about the concept of eternity. Do you remember the two types of eternity? How we learned about them in the wedding parking lot when you turned on the radio, the gospel channel. Why were they even talking about eternity? What did it have to do with the suddenly broody guitars? You had a peach sample. I remember the snappy, kissy sound of the lid coming off in your hand. One type of eternity, they said, is inside of time, is endless time. life without death. We were inside a Toyota. I said, we need a new umbrella. Do you remember when we first rhymed? Do you remember the first time I asked you about the rain, the expression, it's raining, cats and dogs, whether it was equally cats and dogs, falling? Can you remember when you learned the word immortality? The hosts on the classical channel were okay. I thought you'd do a much better job. I remember saying so while you drove us home. Our apartment, our third. Remember the day we moved into our first, the boxes of books and boxes of books, my books. Our sweating 3 flights of the greenest stairs, and you said never again, and the again, and again, and the other type of eternity is outside of time, beyond it, no beginning, no end. I remember your hand, the lid, your hands, the steering wheel, your lips, the way you took a sip, gave me a kiss before starting to drive. Do you remember the first time you drove me home, before home meant where we both lived? The books on the shelves, the books in the closet when they ran out of shelves, the second apartment, that's Texas. Remember the dust, the flat, another type of eternity, that dusty sun. And driving to the supermarket, what was it called there? And that hand soap we get, which scent was your favorite? I don't remember what it was called, can't remember exactly the smell, but your hands, after washing, I remember kissing them. Don't you remember when you thought, when you saw things were ephemeral? Can you remember when you learned the word ephemeral, the word immortality? Probably the latter first, and isn't that something? Immortality first, then menus and movie tickets. What was the first nickname, the fifth umbrella, the type of taco you ordered on the 16th trip? Remember driving, remember when you thought the world was below. Remember how signs the letter exploding in yours. Do you remember you were driving, we were halfway home, only 8 minutes from Redlands. Remember when we measured distance in terms of Redlands, like it was a lighthouse, or a pyramid, or a sacred tree. Remember when your name was Fluttersaurus Vex, and mine wasn't. Remember when I lived like a letter following cartoonish slow-mo down 4 flights of stairs. Did you picture a letter with the alphabet or a letter I written to you? Remember when I asked you about the rain, when the wizard jumped out, when I lied and you laughed, when I lied, when I lied, when I lied? Can you remember last night, how I crossed my arms at the bed, and arranged just so, how I pictured my face polished as though alive, and no, you can't remember that, since it happened while you were sleeping and I wasn't. I was up, wondering why people always talk about death as sleep, and how much I love sleep, hate death. And as I told you about the student who said, I'm really, really afraid of death, just like that, in class. It was fitting, because it was poetry class, haha, and I loved it for saying that. I wanted to say I loved it, I couldn't. I was thinking about you sleeping and me not, about me sleeping and you not, and what even is outside the time, beyond then, now. No thanks. I prefer the type of eternity where we are inside us. And last night's movie, good, not great. A stray piece of popcorn still under our coffee table. Do you remember when the world signed the letter, yours ephemerally? Remember when I asked you about the rain, the cats and dogs of it, if it was 50% cats, 50% dogs, 100% falling, and you said, of course. And you said, she's gotten the floods not till I'm going to drive. I remember you driving to your mother, West Texas to upstate New York. You didn't make it in time, she had little time. I remember your face pressed into my shoulder. I remember your mother was an endless, a question your face asked into my shoulder. How I wanted it to answer, but I couldn't. I didn't go with you when I couldn't. I chose a poetry reading instead. Thought, she'll be there. You'll be there. Is memory the best eternity we can make? The only. And you said it's equal. The cats and dogs raining down, though in terms of overall volume. The rain, it's all different breeds of cat or dog, and see there are more individual cats, since there are more very large breeds of dog. The cats have to balance things out with their number, but the dogs, don't you worry, they're raining down too. cats and dogs, lots of water for the plants, for the flowers, for the whole street, and our dusty car windows, for the cats and dogs underground, the cats and dogs that aren't named, at least not yet. And maybe that's another eternity. The rainy time. I remember winter was home. The radio was on. We made a sound of the lid coming on. Thanks.
Peter, thanks for coming. Buy a book on sale downstairs and have a great night.